everyone, right, left, or green, understands the meaning of food bank attendance, and everyone understands its meaning the same way. We all know exactly what we're talking about. Going to a food bank is a bad thing, and it means you don't have enough money to buy food. You are, in other words, what we call food insecure. So why talk about food banks and food insecurity under the theme Energy Full Spectrum? Well, energy equals calories equals food, but as I will hopefully convince you, giving calories through food does little to restore the energy of food insecure Canadians. Energy is also synonymous with vitality, which encompasses health, humanity, dignity. I believe the draining of vitality is at the core of the harm done by food insecurity, and that few things drain the vitality of Canadians more than having to go to a food bank. Let me explain. We are all agreed that having to go to the food bank because you can't afford food is bad, right? So back to your mind's eye. Elementary school children of a variety of ethnic backgrounds are sitting around a table, laughing and eating cereal from colored plastic bowls with matching juice glasses. You can tell they're in the auditorium of their school because there's a basketball hoop in the back and some banners for teens. Look again, and now it's Christmas time, and there's an elaborate buffet laid out, and servers wearing Santa hats are dishing out turkey dinner for men and women who mouth thank yous as they take their plates and go to sit down at long tables. Now listen to a member of the Legislative Assembly in Nova Scotia as he says, "I would also want to mention the food bank volunteers, the people I am sure would go hungry many nights if it were not for these volunteers who work overtime at no pay." And read the Globe and Mail to learn that Calgary's own interfaith food bank was named one of the top 50 great places to work in Canada. Or imagine taking a course, Food Banking 101, that's what they call it, from the national organization Food Banks Canada. You'll learn how to get space, volunteers, financial support, other community support to start your own food bank. They'll also tell you how to spin off enterprises, including a soup kitchen, shelter or drop-in, a basic food cupboard, and what they call faith-based services. What's wrong with these pictures? It seems like the only solution that's being put forward to people having to go to the food bank is to make better food banks and to find better ways to give people free food. And what a successful industry we have created in every community and corner of this great country in the name of those who can't afford food for themselves and their families. Can't afford food. That is the basis of the formal definition of food insecurity used by researchers and governments in Canada and elsewhere. Food insecurity is lack of access to food because of financial constraints. It is mostly about poverty, but not all the poor are food insecure, and not all non-poor households are food secure. Food insecurity is actually quite common, affecting about 8% of Canadian households. We can create sky-high rates of food insecurity in some segments of the population, like Alberta did in 2004, with 84% of households reliant on income support or welfare reporting food insecurity in a national survey with a gold standard measure. So if we use a poverty lens, groups vulnerable to food insecurity are predictable. Lone mother-led households, low-income, low-educated households, households reliant on social assistance, or combinations thereof. Some groups among the food insecure might surprise you. In absolute numbers, the working poor outnumber other food insecure people. Immigrants who've been in Canada for more than 5 years are more food insecure than newcomers. Lone mothers are far more food insecure than lone fathers, meaning that this is about more than lone parenthood. Children are far less food insecure than their parents, particularly their mothers. Some labor sectors, such as the pink-collar ghetto or the secretarial pool, are more food insecure than warranted given the educational level of their workforce. We also see food insecurity playing out in our racialized workforce, with Canadians of African origin significantly more food insecure than their similarly educated counterparts of other races. In contrast, the elderly are pretty well protected from food insecurity because they've been the recipients of guaranteed income assistance. Now, that's going to change, of course, as we claw back the old age security and we implement it towards being received at older ages. We recently looked at low-income single seniors aged 60 to 64 years and those aged 65 to 69. By merely turning 65 and therefore receiving a guaranteed income through old age security, food insecurity went from 22% in the younger age group to 11% in the older group, and health improved for the older people. Among Quebec workers, and indeed in Quebec as a whole, there are consistently lower food insecurity rates than in the rest of Canada. We think this is because of their more European-style social democratic regime. The list of vulnerable groups points out that food insecurity is not a matter of character, budgeting skills, or bad luck, but rather that the social safety net that was created to protect the dignity, health, and humanity of all Canadians fails to provide sufficient income to people who are left having to resort to food banks. It also points out that there are structures in our economy and industrial sector that are equally failing workers in not providing a living wage. And at least one insurance scheme, the old age pension, can profoundly reduce the prevalence of the problem. Did I say social safety net? Contrary to popular belief, including a food security coalition who stated that 30 years later, food banks have become a permanent part of the social safety net, food banks are not part of the social safety net. They are part of a charitable response operating entirely outside of governments. To say that food banks are part of the social safety net is to say that the moratorium on cod fishing after the collapse of the Atlantic fishery was conservation. The social safety net has failed folks, and food banks have obscured our ability to recognize that failure. Yet for some reason, the responses to food insecurity that have been taken up from small communities to Parliament Hill have singularly focused on food-based solutions, so that food is the currency used to address food insecurity, not money, which is actually the currency that people could use to buy their way out of the problem. Instead, the Build a Better Food Bank industry expands and the dignity of currency is rejected. Now, if I tell you a little bit more about why it's bad to be food insecure and to have to go to the food bank, the problem with a food-based response might be even clearer. Food insecurity is very bad for health, and the way that it harms health in adults and in children is not through poor diet, which is a minor component of the health harm we see. Malnutrition is not a manifest outcome of food insecurity in Canada, although poorer food quality and certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies can sometimes be found. The health harm of food insecurity arises largely from the indignity, the stress, the relentless struggle, the draining of energy, wasted vitality, wasted energy, if you like. So given the drivers of food insecurity, it seems obvious that far more is required to instill vitality into people's lives than giving them food. Food insecurity is mostly about a lack of humanity, and thinking about it as having anything meaningfully related to food is misguided. It is such misunderstanding that is at the root of the absence of appropriate actions from the public and public policy makers alike. The transient and minor good that food banks do for recipients is at the price of doing them serious harm by perpetuating non-responses to fundamental structural issues that rob Canadians who use food banks of their dignity. At the same time, donors and volunteers seem to be receiving enormous gratification from food banking. What's wrong with that picture? We are all agreed that having to go to the food bank is bad. Now we only need to agree that the way to end the problem is to ensure that all Canadians have the means to buy food for themselves and their families. People having to go to a food bank is a problem that arises out of unfair market conditions and weak social protection. This is a problem that can be reduced by half overnight. Just issue birth certificates to everyone hungry, making them age 65. Is there another public health problem that can be resolved at such a level so simply? Thank you.